Thanks for tuning into the BoshNRoll channel. Liking and subscribing to the channel is free and easy, and it helps me out a lot. If you want to go a little farther with your support, I have Patreon and YouTube membership available, which includes access to the BoshNRoll Discord server, early access to things I'm working on, sideboard plans, cards I'm buying. You could have me play your deck on the channel, and the highest tiers come with individual coaching sessions. If you use the YouTube membership option, you get sweet, unique YouTube badges and emotes for the channel. If you want to play what I'm playing, you can use the code BoshNRoll to support my channel while you shop for cards at tcgplayer.com. And if you're playing on Magic Online, a cardhoarder.com loan account can let you play any deck anytime. If you want to wear your support, there is BoshNRoll merch available. All of these links are in the video description below. Thank you so much for watching. Now let's go play some Magic. Hey everyone, welcome to another BoshNRoll video. This one's going to be a little different. This past weekend was the Legacy Pit Open in Frederick, Maryland. It was 351 players, I think, and I made a pretty deep run in the tournament. And I had a bunch of people asking me if I was going to do a post-mortem to talk about the list and how the tournament went, and I've never done this before. So basically what I'm going to do here is kind of informally just go through my Twitter feed. I was posting live updates and talk about the event from memory. Hopefully this video ends up like 10-15 minutes long, an easy listen if you want to hear about this deck some more. But here is the deck on camera right now, again live from my Twitter feed. This is 4-color Bant. I've been calling it Loam Bant. It's not really Bant Loam because in my head, you put the second word, the more important word second. So like Bant Loam is like, it's a Loam deck. It's just Bant colors. And Loam Bant is like, it's a Bant deck, but it has Loam in it. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how my brain works. So I'm calling this Loam Bant. And basically what I did with this deck was I took the traditional Bant deck, which basically couldn't win in time. There were not enough win conditions. It was too slow. It couldn't break up late game engines like Caracas, Yorion, or Field of the Dead. And I put one Wasteland in the deck, some Life from the Loams, and my own Field of the Dead. Field of the Dead, like, all you can do in Bant is hit your land drops. That's the most important thing you're doing. You're trying to do that anyway. Hitting your land drops beats Wasteland. When you beat Wasteland, you also beat Daze by extension. And hitting your land drops is all I want to do in Legacy. And I've literally turned it into a win condition for this build of the deck. And Light from the Loam replaces Sylvan Library. I got a lot of questions like, where's your Sylvan Library? It seems weird to play not play Sylvan Library when you have Uro in your deck. And if you take bird's eye view of the format and you understand that Prismatic Ending is a 4-of in every deck that can play it, even decks that don't normally play white are playing Prismatic Ending, Sylvan Library starts to look really bad. And Light from the Loam, you hit your next 3 land drops. That's usually all you need. A lot of the play patterns, I end up loaming back 2 or 3 lands early, and then I just hit my land drops the rest of the game, and I might dredge that loam on like turn 9 when I'm trying to fuel an Uro. Like, this is not a deck where you just dredge loam every turn. You just want to make sure you hit your land drops, get those 2 or 3 cards worth of advantage, and you're ahead, you're set up. And then just beat them with your Bant deck, and eventually Field of the Dead's going to take over. That's how I built this deck. The one expressive iteration down here is just because we can. I'm splashing red anyway. I really like the Pyroblast out of the sideboard. I really like having a 4th color to exile things like Jace or out of Prismatic Ending. So one of expressive iterations just because we can, and it's been really good. As far as the sideboard goes, on Magic Online, I'd be skewed a little harder towards spell-based combo, like Doomsday and Storm. In real life, I switched my second Meddling Mage to a second Containment Priest, because I think Elves and Sneak and Show are more popular than Doomsday and Dark Ritual Storm decks in Paper Legacy. And it turns out I was right, at least in the field I saw. But this is the deck. I've released, I think, 3 full-length videos at this point. If not, I have 2, and another one's on the way later this week. So if you want more, you can check that out. But that's the list. Let's talk about this tournament. First off, I started off by saying this. Everyone was wearing masks. It was a pretty strict mask policy, but there was no way to socially distance in the hall. There were just 400 people in a room that you could probably socially distance 100. We were packed in like sardines. I wasn't super comfortable about all of that. And for those reasons, I'm probably basically just determined for myself I'm not ready to be in public with that many people again. So I'm probably not doing a big paper event anytime soon. But I was there to play Legacy, so I got over it and played some Legacy. Round 1, I I did something that I don't normally do, which is just tell everyone what deck I'm playing. But if you follow my Patreon, if you follow my feed, you knew that anyway. So I just said, I'm playing Loam Bant. I'll reveal the sideboard later. Round 1, I played against lands, actual red-green lands, and I was just a better Loam deck than them. Between 3 Endurance, 2 Force of Negation, I have 5 answers to their 4 Loams, and both games I just maneuvered to a place where I was Loaming and they weren't, and their Wastelands couldn't keep up. They had Field of the Dead in one of the games, but every time they had to Wasteland me to keep me off my Field of the Dead, set them back from their own Field of the Dead, and I was able to just take over and win with my other things while they never really got off the ground. Round 2, I defeated this like 4-color Maverick Loam deck. It was pretty cool. It looked like base Abzan, but then it also had blue just for Uro. But I was a better 4-color Loam deck than they were, again, which was a lot of fun. Prismatic Ending solves a lot of the problems that matchups like that used to have. Like, my opponent resolved a Liliana the Last Hope, which used to be terrifying for blue-white decks. They resolved a Kaya, which did some damage on her way through, but I was able to remove her. Just no big deal. You just have 4 things that can kill a 3-mana Planeswalker now. It's pretty insane. And once I got through the initial wave of nonsense, I was able to just take over with my better late game. My opponent also mulliganed a lot during this match, so that helped. Round 3. In between rounds, I started to get hungry, and I was like, oh, what food is here? The only thing they had was roller hot dogs. Like, they literally had like one of those things from the gas station where the hot dogs just roll and get hot, or stay lukewarm. And it cost $7 to get a hot dog with some fries. And I was like, wow, do I even really like Magic tournaments, or am I just fondly remembering something that's not true? But I guess that comes with the territory. I did not actually eat one of them. I just decided to be hungry for a little while instead. Bant Food Chain. This match was really cool, and it brings us to the first like really reflective point of the tournament, where I won a long game 1, and I recognized they were on Food Chain pretty early. They started on a Birds of Paradise, but then played like a lot of normal Bant cards, and I was like, okay, this is definitely Food Chain or Lauren. And they had a Manipulate Fate at some point, and I was like, okay, Food Chain confirmed. So I had to work through the 3 creatures from Manipulate Fate, which is exile 3 cards from your deck and draw a card, and you exile 3 Mist Hollow Griffins, so then you have 4 mana 3/3s in exile, and you draw a card, so it's just like draw 4. So I worked through that super long game 1 that I won. There was about 15 minutes left on the clock, and I could have boarded to not lose and just try to win the match 1-0, which there's some unethical ways to do that. Like, if you manipulate the clock on purpose, you're cheating. It's called stalling. And that's different from slow play, which is just you're playing too slowly. Like, stalling is intentional, and you can't do that. But what you can do is set up your deck to take as long as possible, like make the game last as long as possible. And I ended up not doing that. I sideboarded to win as if it was like game 3 and I had to get over the finish line, which ended up being a mistake. I lost with about 90 seconds left on the clock when they jammed their combo, and my hand was just a bunch of like Endurances and Shark Typhoons and stuff, when I think I should have just had all 6 forces in the deck, should have had Force of Vigor in the deck, Engineered Explosives, just sit in and play on 3, just make sure they never stick a Food Chain, and then they can't win fast enough. I think that's how I should have played the match, and just settled into a defensive posture and not worry about winning because the clock was going to win for me. And that's just something you have to consider in Paper Magic, especially when you're playing a deck like Bant. But that's the first potential regret here. Sneak and Show was the next round. This match was kind of stressful. My opponent was super nice, but very clearly not an experienced tournament player, which, if you are an experienced tournament player, I think you know the type where they're just sort of like not playing particularly quickly, and the clock is ticking down, and they're like making all this banter. It's like you counter their show and tell, and then there's like this big dramatic like, ah, oh, you had the force, didn't you? It's like, okay, yes, I did. Can we play the match? And I'm not trying to sound like a dick, but like we saw last round, the clock matters, and timing out because your opponent is taking their time with banter and like silly conversation rather than playing the match is pretty frustrating. We also had another moment where in game 3, I was trying to get the game done. Like going into game 3, I was like, we got 14 minutes, let's play quick. And he seemed to take that to heart, and there was less banter and more play. But there was a turn where I had Uro and Snapcaster Mage in play, and I said, go to combat. And he said, yeah. Then I turned my creature sideways. I wrote down my life total change from the Uro trigger. I picked up the card from Uro, and he said, before you attack, Brazen Borrower your Uro. And I was like, what? We're clearly like mid-combat at this point. Like I've already seen the face of this card. And we called a judge, and the judge misunderstood the question, I think. The judge seemed kind of new. No offense to the judge if you're watching this, but having been a judge for 13 years myself, combat in tournament Magic, that is a shortcut that says, I'd like to attack. Like if you say combat in your main phase, you're going into attackers. That shortcut exists because most people don't take action at the beginning of combat before attacks. Like that's an unusual time to take actions. Most things you could do in combat before attacks, you could also just do in the main phase. And that shortcut exists. It's an established, accepted, like written down shortcut that combat means attacks. And the judge, rather than understanding the call as a communication issue, ruled as if I didn't understand how the phases of Magic works, which took a little back and forth. And we eventually got to the point where the judge was just like, oh yeah, well, since there's a spot there, he can bounce your Uro before you attack, which then caused a shuffle of my deck. I didn't get a penalty because there was communication involved, and I ended up just force negationing the petty theft anyway, and it's just like, okay, that was a good use of our time. But if you're going to play in tournaments, make sure that you understand that you're sharing the clock, keep the game moving, understand that communication is really important, and saying yeah to something like combat means specifically, I'm going to attack you now. And that is just how the Magic tournament rules work. Luckily, it didn't really matter. Got through there, but the match took longer than it needed to, and there was that awkward judge call along the way. Next round, I beat Green-White Depths. My opponent had a quick Merit Lage with Sejiri Step backup in game 1. I didn't know what they were playing, and I didn't keep a hand that was particularly good at dealing with that. Really, my plan was to chump the Merit Lage for a turn with Endurance, and then untap and hope to ponder into another answer to it. Like, I just really wasn't set up to play that game, and he had the Sejiri Step to punch through Endurance anyway. But then the other two games were, like, I was loaming, I had Wasteland available, I had Plow, Caracas, like, Merit Lage was not going to connect in either of those second games ever. And we had a really good back and forth game 2 that I won. Then game 3 kept a hand that could turn 2 or turn 3 Merit Lage if he drew a land. Like he had like Yavimaya, Dark Depths, Mox Diamond, but no second land. And maybe a crop rotation. I don't know. Like the game went on for a long time because I'm on Bant, but he just really didn't do anything for most of it. Round 6, I played against Is It Delver on camera. It was basically how I drew it up. It could not have gone better. Like my opponent, game 1, had turn 1 Ragavan. I had Caracas, just bounced it. The Ragavan was never a threat at all. By the time Murktide Regent got online, I just had Plows up, and I double blocked a 6/6 Murktide Regent with 2 Endurances and just got to eat it, trade an Endurance for a Murktide Regent, good deal. Field of the Dead got online in both games. Uro showed up like clean textbook 2-0. That's on camera on the Legacy Pit. If you want to check them out, they're on YouTube and Twitch, and their VODs are up. This is a funny story from the event, and a really weird interaction, but I'll take it. I took my water bottle that I carry over to the bar. We were at a hotel that had a bar, and I was like, hey, can you fill this with Diet Coke? And the bartender was like, ooh, I could. It would just be really expensive. Like, we don't do free refills, so I'd have to, like... She showed me, like, the plastic solo cups that they use for soft drinks, and she's like, yeah, I'd have to, like, fill this and pour it in 4 or 5 times, and it's, like, $2 each. It would cost you, like, $10 to get your water bottle filled. And I was just like, oh, okay, thanks. Never mind then. And then she was like, oh, actually, I'll give you a little bit. And then she put a little bit in. And then she was like, do you want ice? I was like, yeah. And then she put some ice in. And then the ice was like basically full to the top. And then she just looked at it and was like, psst, and filled it up the rest of the way. And then I tried to pay her and she was like, no, it's free. Don't worry about it. So I just tipped her and thanked her and like, okay. That was a weird interaction, but I'll take it. The next round was a Bant Mirror, which is kind of cheating because my deck is so stacked. Like, Field of the Dead is genuinely unbeatable, and I have the red splash as well. Like, I was pretty stacked up for the Bant Mirror, ready for that one. My opponent had some wild tech. They played a Shifting Ceratops in our second game, which kind of caught me off guard because they had piled up... I was, like, treading water with a Jace. It was like they had Ice Fang Coatl and a 1/1 Shark in play versus my Jace, where I had to plus Jace every turn, and then it got knocked back down to 1. Then I'd plus Jace every turn, and it got knocked back down to 1 from those 2 points, while we were, like, playing the game around that. Like, there was that mini game and then every other card. And they put me in a position where I had to plow an Endurance, and then they untapped and jammed Shifting Ceratops. And they just moved into combat, turned all their stuff sideways, and I was like, hold on, Shifting Ceratops doesn't have haste naturally, you got to pay a green for that. And they had clearly just gotten excited and turned their creature sideways and forgot to play land number 5 and give it haste, which would have killed my Jace, put me way behind. But instead, they attacked Jace to 2, awkwardly played the 5th land, second main, and then I was able to untap and Prismatic Ending for 4 to get rid of the Ceratops, and then I was able to take over from there. So they made a little misstep there. They also jammed From the Ashes during that game, which is a weird card. I think I had more basics than they were expecting because they cast it, and then I just put 5 lands into play from my deck, and they were like, oh, okay. And then I eventually cast Light from the Loam and got all the lands they destroyed back, so that didn't work out so hot. Because I took the early draw, I couldn't draw in. 603 is the same as 7-2, which isn't a top 8 most of the time. So I had to play both of the last rounds, and they were both win-and-ins. I lost to Is It Delver. This one was totally my fault. I got reckless with my fetch lands. What happened was I tried to turn 1 Ponder off basic island. Then I had to cast Swords to Plowshares on turn 2, and I was trying to line up an Endurance for turn 3, which means that I needed blue, white, then double green on subsequent turns. So I had to fetch Savannah to cast the Plow, which got wasted. Then after Savannah got wasted, I kind of was like, okay, well, I'll just get the better white source. So I got Tundra. Then they had a second Wasteland. And then I never drew another white source. And I died from 12 to a Dragon's Rage Channeler. Like, it just attacked me 4 times. And my hand was 3 plows. And that sucked. But it's my fault. I could have fetched a basic Plains with either of those fetch lands. And I think I would have won that game pretty easily. In game 2 of this match, I went first. And my opponent wastelanded me twice. I played all my lands, and on their 4th turn, they played their second land because they had gone land, waste you, and then they played their second land, jammed Expressive Iteration, exiled Volcanic Island, then tried to play Volcanic Island, and I was like, hold on, it's turn 4, you've played 4 lands, you don't have a land drop, which resulted in a gigantic judge call about my opponent just refusing to believe that it was turn 4, and the judge did a card count. We went action by action through the first 4 turns of the game. We did another card count, and the opponent was still like, no, that's wrong. And eventually the judge was like, you got to play the game. And my opponent clearly just lost track of what turn it was, and that sucks. Like, they basically just exiled a land for no reason, wasted their Expressive Iteration, but, like, you know, we're playing for $20,000. You got to tighten up. Like, sorry. That did happen. Ended up losing the match anyway. That game 1 where I was never winning that second game. Their secret tech was True Name Nemesis, which I had boarded out my dress downs because most of the decks play Court of Cunning or Narset in those spots, but my opponent had True Name that I wasn't ready for. I was able to Terminus one of them, and then I had like 1 Engineered Explosives in my deck to deal with the other and didn't have time to figure it out. And I didn't get a game 3, but if I had won that game 1 by fetching correctly, I would have had a crack at game 3. And then, unfortunately, the end of the tournament, the second win-in got paired against Is It Delver again. Game 1, I drew, I think, 13 lands out of the 17 cards I saw that game, and the cards I saw, the actual spells, were like Force and Force of Will and Negation. But I could have and probably should have mulliganed game 1. I think I kept a hand that was like 4 lands, Ponder, Endurance, Force of Will, Force of Negation. And that's not really what you want. You want to see white cards against Delver, and I knew it was Delver. Like, when you're at the end of a tournament like that, you've scouted everyone at your record, you know who's playing what. And I should have mulliganed for a hand with some white cards, or at least fewer counter spells. I figured, like, Force of Will, pitching Force of Negation isn't that bad, because I don't really want either of those cards, so it's not a big loss to pitch Force of Negation if I have to Force of Will in early play. But he just had the turn 1 Dragon Rage Channeler into turn 2 Dash Ragavan, Daze to protect it, and I was just never in that game. And it was like one of those situations where, like, every turn Ragavan would connect, take, like, Ponder or Brainstorm, and then I would draw a land. And then it would connect again, take Ponder or Brainstorm, and then I'd draw a land. And if, like, my deck was just in the alternate order, where they were taking lands and I was drawing Ponders and Brainstorms, maybe we have a game. But yeah, I just got smushed. And the second game, I mulled to 5 on the play, was just down 3 cards and was never in it, and Ragavan picked me apart. This was the first opponent out of my 3 Delver opponents who dashed Ragavan almost exclusively. I don't think he cast it once, other than dash mode. Like, never gave me a chance to Prismatic End it or Terminus it or anything, just always chipping in with smart little dashes. So my opponent played really well, and Variance finally caught off to me after a day of run goods. But 6-2-1, I ended up 30th, top 32 prizes, which is slightly better than my money back. But that was my experience with Bant Loam, or Loam Bant, a 4-color Loam Bant. If I were to play a paper tournament tomorrow, I don't think I would change a single card from this list. If I were going to play on Magic Online, I would turn Containment Priest into a second Meddling Mage, and Hydroblast might want to be something else. Engineered Explosive might want to be something else. Maybe another Flusterstorm. There's just more combo, more degenerate combo, and less creature-y type combo on Magic Online than there is in real life. And that was my tournament experience at the Legacy Pit. It was a lot of fun. This deck was great. It felt really good to make a deep run with a deck of my own design. Like, I think I'm the only one doing this sort of thing right now with the Bant shell. I think this should be more popular because it's really good. It solves the problems that Bant needed to solve, which is the clock in control mirrors and breaking up late game engines like Field of the Dead and Caracas out of Death and Taxes and lands and green-white and all of those decks that can do that sort of thing. And the Loam package solves both of those problems spectacularly. That's it. This ended up being, like 20 minutes instead of 10, so you got your money's worth. Thank you for checking it out, and feel free to check out this deck. I posted this deck and my sideboard guide and a video playing it all on Patreon before the event. So if you want what I'm playing in the future, before future Legacy events, make sure to join that Patreon. The link's in the video description below. That's a great way to support the channel, and you get something out of it. Like, you could have had this for the tournament if you were signed up, and you could have whatever I'm playing in the future. I'll always post my deck before a major tournament to the Patreon subscribers. Thank you all for checking this out. I hope you have fun with this deck if you choose to play it. And if you choose to buy it in real life, make sure to use my TCG Player affiliate link. And like and subscribe to the channel, as usual, and I'll see you next time.